Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Hanging On to Hope podcast. On today's show, we have Mary Demuth, author of the book, Love, Pray, Listen, Parenting Your Wayward Adult Kids with Joy. Mary is an international speaker, podcaster, and author of over 40 books. So welcome to the show, Mary.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah. Continuing with part 2 with Mary Demuth.
So I have this question that the friend that recommended this book to me, she asked, I said, do you have any questions you want me to ask her? And so this is a question that she gave me. How do I keep from getting pulled into a paralyzing, overwhelming grief over my child's lostness, since it seems against the odds that he or she will turn again to God? What can I hang on to, recite, or do to keep my heart buoyed up with hope in God's unfailing love for my sons?
I think that comes, and again, this isn't going to be a simple, neat answer, but it does rest and rise and rely on our connectedness to the Lord. And because joy doesn't come from circumstances, we know that joy comes from the Lord. And so the more we can enter into the grief with him, and that's why I like to talk about how God understands wayward kids, because 100% of his kids are wayward.
Yeah.
We can have that like deep fellowship of grief with him and share it alongside and say, Lord, I am hurting. And you understand because you are hurting too. Your kids have walked away from you, but I do know and I do believe that you love my adult kids more than I do. And I don't want to live in this grief forever. Now, it is not wrong to grieve. Everyone should grieve. And that's why we have all those beautiful lament psalms throughout the book of Psalms to kind of give us this guidance on how to lament and how to process our grief. But there does come a time when we have so given into it that it affects our day-to-day effectiveness and our joy. And there is a decision that needs to be made after you have grieved to say, Lord, I cannot control this. There is nothing I can do. They are in your hands. And I guess I also go back to a prayer that I have prayed for a particular family member over 40 years. And there, just to be super honest, there were times when I was like, I guess I'll pray again, but I don't think it's going to matter. And yet recently, just in the past couple months, that 40-year prayer is coming to fruition, and it is beautiful to watch, and it's God's perfect timing. And that has really helped me in my relationship with my adult kids to know that I can continue to tarry in prayer. And I think here's another thing too. I guess this is a lot of an answer, but when we look at our expectation for what we wanted to see our kids become immediately after they leave the nest, that can easily become an idol. And anytime they do not live up to that immediately, we can be super sad. But what I have found is when I move that out of the way, and I just simply assess what's going on right now, I begin to see God's hand in their lives in very small and subtle ways. But I could not see those subtle workings of the Lord with that idol in front of me of what I wanted my perfect family to look like when they left the nest.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like not having these huge expectations that may not be realistic.
Yeah. And then what I look at too is since they've been adults, is in the conversations that I have had with them, I'll think back and remember the times like where my daughter, because all my kids like just recently in the last few months moved into a rental home, and I moved because I needed that separation. It was time.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, Mom, I'm having trouble sleeping. Can you come over and pray over the house like you did? It's things like that I'll hold on to because they all say, oh, I don't believe in that right now. But then one minute they believe.
That's right.
So I know that they were raised in and they know the Bible, and so I hear those things coming out of them. Or I remember one time in high school, my daughter was saying, "Oh no, I'm not a Christian anymore," whatever. She was blouting it out. And then we'd be driving and she'd go to make a left turn and she was all scared. And she's like, "Please, Lord Jesus, help me." And I could hear her under her breath. Like, she's the same. Help me make this turn. Like, so I feel like I just hold on to those little things that I know it's there.
Yeah.
And I just keep praying, because otherwise I don't know. It is very, very hard. And I let go. I'm not a controlling person. So I let go of that a long time ago. And I want them to just be happy and do what they want to do. I don't have any expectations of what I wanted them to turn out to be, except just a loving God and living their purpose out for Him. That's really my expectation. So I know God will do that. So you talk about how pride severs us from empathy. Concerning ourselves about our reputation over hearing the heart will break down the relationship. You say when children are young, they ask questions with their behavior. But when they are older, they ask questions in different ways. Questions like, will you love me if I stray from the faith? Will you love me if I descend into depression? Will you love me if I fail at my job? Will you love me if I vote different than you? Etc. Our adult kids will make choices that sometimes confound us and sometimes devastate us. If they invite conversation and ask our opinions, we should offer it. You say this is what Moses talks about in Deuteronomy 6, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up, verses 6-7. Why are boundaries an important aspect here?
Well, I think a couple things are going on here, but one, in terms of boundaries, I think it is definitely appropriate to have boundaries with your adult kids. And I talk about in the book, especially kids that are drug abusing and robbing you. There should be some boundaries put into place, definitely. But yes, they are asking, to go on to the other aspect of the question. They're constantly asking those questions. Will my parents love me if I differ from them in some sort of way?
My kids actually ask me that.
Yeah,
No,
I would. I know.
You'll love me if I was this, and I'm like, and they think I'm going to say no.
No, I won't love you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, but that's true. I mean, they physically ask us that question, and they also non-verbally are asking that question. They're watching us, and I think this is where the discipleship journey the rubber meets the road. Of what do we really believe, and how much do we believe in God's ability to woo a person to Himself, versus our, like somehow it's all 100% dependent on whether we checked all the right parenting boxes. God is so much more creative and beautiful and bigger than that. And so I have to, as I'm walking and as I'm growing in Christ, I have to ask Him to help me to love my kids when they do things that bother me or hurt me. And that to me is the greater ethic of love. It's easy to love people that are like you. Mm-hmm. It's hard to love people who are opposed to you or have opposing views of you. Yet Jesus is very clear that we are to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And sometimes it's our kids. They will persecute us, but we're still called to love them.
Yeah. That's good.
It is so very true. You say that since we sometimes treat our families differently than how we treat our friends, the potential for hurt is bigger with our family members, where our real selves come out, like you're saying. Our interactions with our adult children can expose any darkness in our own hearts, which is the only thing we can control. You say it's easier to spot rudeness in others than ourselves. Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yes.
Can you share the importance of training our thoughts? I thought this was a really good part of your book, that how we see our own sin, and don't allow blindness to our own sin to cause us to be rude to our kids and to others.
You find this in, like, quote unquote, the bigger sins, and especially in like sexual type sins, or identity sins. Because if I don't struggle with same-sex attraction, it is very easy for me to see the problem in the other. Because and I don't struggle with that, but I may struggle with gossip, and it may be easy for someone else to see that problem in me and not see it in themselves. And so it's just really important that we don't have different standards for people who sin differently from us. It seems like we tend to give ourselves a pass on our own little pet sins that we don't think are that big of a deal. Although when we read what the fruits of darkness are, or the fruits of the flesh are, before we read the fruits of the Spirit, I mean, there's a lot of pretty amazing words there, like enmities and strife and all these kinds of things. We only concentrate on the sexual ones usually, but these mouth sins are pretty severe. And we're like, la, 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 that doesn't really matter, but I'm going to judge you on your sin. So we just have to go to the Lord, the Psalm 139, search me, O God, know my heart, and let him find out what's going on in us, because it is very hard when we constantly see logs everywhere else that are splinters and we've got the logs in our own eye. We have to be careful to take the log out first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's
Absolutely.
to do that.
Wow, that's good. You say to love, pray, and listen is to experience, grieve, and surrender. It is to let go, to understand we all have sinful DNA coursing through our bodies. We hurt others and they hurt us. This is a reality of life. What we do next proves our maturity. How do we move on after hurt?
Well, that's the golden question, I think. And as I've mentioned, earlier in some of the questions that you asked, is we have to go to Jesus first. So instead of letting that pain then inform the way we retort against somebody, like just overreact in the moment, we take all of that pain and we get on our knees and we complain to the Lord about it and say, this has just broken my heart. I don't know what to do in this situation. Please help me. And it's that turning to the Lord first before we go off on our mouth to somebody else is the mark of maturity. And the Lord has really, really good ears, really great shoulders to shoulder our burdens. And when we process it with him, it's very helpful. And then sometimes it's good to, if we have some safe people in our life, in our lives that we can process that pain with, that has helped me quite a bit too, because it's good to pray, but sometimes we need the voice of another encouraging parent to say, yes, I've walked through that before, or I will pray for you as well, because that's very difficult. Just getting it outside of your heart and outside of your head is so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm just remembering that he understands where our hearts and where we're coming from.
Yeah, I think if we just lash out too quickly before going to our knees, it could just destroy a relationship. Like, you really do have to take it to God over and over again. Because a lot of times we are taking something just way overboard and we're thinking things that aren't true. And yeah, we all do it. So it is what you said is just, I felt God so much, his presence when you were speaking. So
I love this quote from Ann Voskamp. Parenting is never about how your kids turn out. It's always and only about how you keep turning toward your kids and their maker. Motherhood is never about training your children to be good so they won't ever fall. It's about letting them see you fall and love every day with a good God. And even after you've fallen hard, they see you keep falling hard for God. Simply, the work of every parent is to give the best they know how, and the work of every child is to forgive their parents the best they know how. Our work will look different, but we both have growing work to do. Anything you'd want to add to that quote?
Not really, because it's amazing, but
I loved it. It is.
I know it's so beautifully written. She's such a great writer.
Yeah.
But I think too, one thing that helps me is how I look before a holy God is the same as how my kids look before a holy God. We are all level at the foot of the cross. And so sometimes we think, well, I'm farther along the journey than my kids, therefore I'm like closer to Jesus than they are, forgetting that before a holy God, we're all a mess. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, if we view our kids as fellow pilgrims on the journey alongside us, it's a whole different dynamic when they leave the nest and we view them that way than that we're always their superiors and we're always better and we're always closer to Jesus, because that's simply not true.
Yeah. You share a lot of great verses about how we cannot know our own hearts, so we cannot know our adult kids any better than our own. Can you share how you learned to err on the side of belief and let the Lord sift the motives of your kids?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, as I mentioned before, I'm still growing in this area. I'm not like the bastion of perfection when it comes to this, but I learned I learned because I made mistakes. So when you have spent 18 years parenting someone and they're 19 years old and they come to you and you give advice again, and then you see them melting underneath that advice, you realize, okay, that's not how I'm supposed to relate to them anymore. And so at that point, that's when I started to realize, and I've mentioned this earlier, is that they're imperfect, I'm imperfect, and if I can catch them doing good, it's going to bless our relationship far more than if I nitpick. Now, there's this difference if my child comes to me and all three of them do and say, Mom, I'm struggling with this. I need your advice. Here's the situation. What would you do? Then absolutely will I tell them my opinion cautiously and kindly, but I won't just unsolicited start giving life advice.
Mm. Yeah, because they're not going to be so prone to listen in that case, for sure.
So that's what I've been doing wrong this whole time. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about, Mom.
I love what you reminded us about hope, because we're called hanging on to hope for a reason. Hope is just one of my favorite subjects in the Bible. If we base our hope on what we can change, which is people, our hope will not be fixed. You say to exercise biblical hope is to practice trust in God even when circumstances don't look promising. Hope is the fuel of the intercessor. We can get caught up in our past mistakes. I know I can go there, but true biblical hope is trusting in the unseen. You say biblical hope is not toppled by the actions of our adult kids. You say love cannot exist without choice. Our kids, like us, have free will. I think that is a very important point in this book. When we parented, whole programs were created for us to grow our children supposedly in the ways of God. And I think, like I was saying in the homeschool community, I think it's very, very prevalent. And we bought into that. We thought, we're just going to homeschool. We're going to stay home and sacrifice, and our kids are going to turn out perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't always happen that way. You say it's because there is safety in controlling behavior and shaping a mind and a will, that's why we have those expectations. It builds into the illusion that we are the master of our children's fate. Now we see concentrating on controlling behavior was short-lived, and it will not serve us now moving forward as a parent. The truth is we never had control. If all of us were forced to love God, there would be no mutuality in that relationship. But you say the hope God gives us is permanent and leads us towards peace, that God gives us the very thing we need to love our adult children. And we'll just end on that because that was such a good quote from your book. So we just thank you so much for being on the show. This was such a great book to read. I knew when I saw the title of your book that I had to get it. So we really appreciate you being on the show and talking about this subject.
Yeah. Where can our listeners buy your book, and can they follow you on social media or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm at Mary Demuth on social media. And then I have a freebie for your people. So they can go to marydemuth.com/LPL, which stands for Love, Pray, Listen. So marydemuth.com/LPL. And there are 52 prayers. You can pray over your children once a week for the year. And it has blanks to put your children's names in. And they don't have to be adults to be able to do that. So 52 prayers for your kids. With blanks that you can put their name in there for the year. So, that's where people can find me.
That's great. I'm going to do that.
How do I get that?
marydemuth.com/LPL. Love, pray, listen.
Well, yeah, that's great.
That's
What a great
awesome.
idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I want to thank you so much for sharing too. This is just so important. And I'm excited to start doing and implementing these things actually.
Yeah.
Even just with a
Convicted me.
small, just telling, we're convicted right now.
Yeah, we're going to text
Very,
them
very
a
convicted.
positive thing to our kids today,
Yeah.
or call
It's
them
just-
and let them know.
Yeah. It's just hard. It's really hard raising adult children
I know. I
and
think
letting
this is
go
one of the most painful. I don't know. I mean, I had 3 kids that were young all at the same time. So I got
Me
pregnant
too.
with my second when I was nursing my first. So I looked
Oh, wow.
But I think this is the hardest parenting stage for me. And I think it is
Yeah,
like
it
you're saying,
is.
it's that lack of control, that it's just hard to see them make mistakes and shutting out God when you know that that's not going to help their life.
Mhm.
But it's just like you said, it's trusting that, well, do we trust God? This is kind of a test of that.
Yeah, I had 3 kids in 5 years, so we're on the
Mhm.
same boat. So it's like, yeah, and now they're grown up, and I didn't have any expectations. I just want them to be, do what they're passionate about, live out their purpose. So I don't know. It is a hard time because when they're younger, and I do hear my kids saying that to me, like, you're being disrespectful. Like, it's because I'm still parenting the way that I did then. And it's so hard to transition out of that. So this was great for me. So thank you so much. I'm not going to keep rambling on and on, but I really, it made me really think about, because this is really the biggest area of struggle in my life, I would say. The biggest right now.
Yeah,
So
it's a big issue.
yeah.
That's why it was good.
And they're all in therapy because of what happened with their father being abusive. And so they're working through their stuff. I'm working through my stuff, but I've got to learn to just love them. And the way you say to do it, like I noticed that's how it has changed. The dynamic has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just listen more and not give advice. It's all good. I got it all in here now. All in my and I
can do
have
it.
this podcast, so I'm going to listen to it over and over again.
Well, I think too, I'm going to add one more thing. I think when our parents let us go, there was more of I'm kicking you out of the nest and I am no longer parenting you.
Yeah.
And I think that was hard because there was no coaching going on. So we were just like sink or swim, fledgling along. And so when we became parents, I think we were like, well, we want to do something a little different. We want to shepherd our kids and help them and coach them in their 20s. And so we're doing things differently, but we don't have any example. I was just dropped off at college as the end of her parenting and that was it. And so I had to kind of like figure it out, and I'm trying to do something different, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah, that was how it was for me too. And I moved to Arizona when I was 20 by myself. Like that was it. The parenting was over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are right. So that is interesting. So it's good that they have us to coach them, but it's just different. Yeah, it's definitely different. So
yeah, it's just having that unconditional love for them, which is easier said than done, but it's just a good reminder that that's how God loves me. So that's how I want, I want them to feel that same love that I feel from God.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you are awesome. And I guess that's it. I guess we're done with the podcast. I got some great bloopers to put at the end. Clearing her throat, me messing up the reading.
We
like
put bloopers on the
times.
end because
That's awesome.
Topics are so serious. You have to have some funny things in there.
Yeah, we do. We do have a lot of funny ones. A lot of people need this. I don't know if I've heard of another book about this yet.
Nope, there isn't one. I looked.
We need to,
That's why you wrote it, right?
Yeah.
We need to help some people here. I'm struggling. So I listen to it and I'm like, okay, here, I'm following you now.
There's so
on
many
Facebook.
friends of mine that have, this is off the record now, but there's so many friends of mine. There were some people that reached out to me because all my son's friends are all kind of in that same boat where they're just really disillusioned with Christianity, and it's sad. And so there were some parents that were going to start a prayer group, and it just kind of fizzled. I don't know why it really never took off, but I just see so many people hurting, over just the lack of relationship they have with their kids and feeling disillusioned. And I'm thankful that I'm glad that I have a close relationship with them.
Yeah, totally. Yes. That's really good news, actually.
Yeah. We might have to have you back to talk about some other topics, because you talk about other abuse topics too, don't you, in your books?
Oh, yes. Yes. I wrote a book called We Too, How the Church Can Respond Redemptively to the Sexual Abuse Crisis. So yes, I definitely talk in that space.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely review your books, because I haven't read any of your other books, but I'll definitely look into that. We might be reaching out to you again.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
Sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks for taking the time.
Sure. Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Boyd, how you say that word?
Buoyed.
You share a lot of great verses about how we cannot know our own hearts, so we cannot know.
There's a lot of negatives in there.
Hello, typos in here.
Excuse me. Let me start that sentence over again. Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.